This video is for Matthew from the channel Footnotes2Plato, and I would like to begin by quoting the lyrics of a song, Infinity by Guru Josh Project, and it says, "My key philosophy is this infinity, and if you take the time to trust in me, you will receive infinity." But I perfectly understand as of now that you will not understand this video before the movement of the negative has progressed and developed, because as of now we are the 7th of March, and I know myself to be what Hegel calls the negative, and I know myself to be in the process of my becoming conscious of myself. I know that I am reason, and in my highest moments I identified with what Fichte, the German philosopher, calls the Das Ich, the self, the absolute consciousness, and I am in this moment, but more in a more determinate way. I would say that I know myself to be reason. And in a video about Hegel and Schelling, you said that you appreciated how deep Hegel is as a thinker, and that he thought of all the criticisms we might have of him, and he incorporated that into his philosophy. So he incorporated the logic of negation into his system. So by contradicting Hegel, you are also confirming Hegel. And this is a very speculative, very deep, very profound thought. And I would like to mention the moment of the negative consists in being in conflict with oneself, between the empirical body in which reason resides, has its being, and the universal determination of reason. So I am, at this moment in my intellectual development, I am a conflictual being, which is why I must keep moving and trying to solve my inner contradictions, which are also the contradictions inherent in reality. But that's a little bit complex. But the only brilliant idea that my empirical me had, and now that I have reflected upon it, it was actually reason which had this idea through him, but is that in order to understand Hegel, we have to consider that all the post-Hegelian philosophers, whether they are anti-Hegelian, indifferent to Hegel, or Hegelian, like the idealist school of thought in the Anglo-Saxon world with Bradley, Royce, and Bosanquet, and all that, but most notably the anti-Hegelian, because what I broadly know as an empirical individual about the history of philosophy for the past 200 years is that all philosophers were anti-Hegelian. They tried to refute Hegel in one way or another. And what I understood in June 2018 was that once Hegel would have heard all the criticism, all the refutations, all the contradictions brought against his system, he would come back to comment his contradictors and those who tried to refute him and to negate him, and he would incorporate this negation within his system, and that would be the truth of Hegel's system. That would be the Wirklichkeit of the system, because in order to become Hegel needs the non-Hegelian philosophers, because this movement of abstract negation concrete, which is the formal definition of dialectics, and the triadic movement of self-negation and return to the self after having been self-negated, is the very movement of Hegel's philosophy. So if we are coherent and consistent, we should apply this movement to Hegel's philosophy. And as Hegel would say, it is not we who apply from the outside, it is the system which applies it from within. So the past 200 years, the history of philosophy is Hegel's system, which is the development of universal spirit and reason, is a self-negating process which produces itself its own negations. And once it has exteriorized the negation, it brings them back within itself and incorporates them within itself. And this is the truth and the concrete and wirklich aspect of Hegel's system. So that was the first idea that I had. And the second was that the meaning of Hegel, the correct interpretation of Hegel would come once all the false interpretations of Hegel's would have been made. And as Hegel would say, if the truth is the result of all the false moments, so if the false or the error is a moment of truth, it is no longer an error, it is simply a moment, and truth is constituted by all the false and erroneous moments. So truth is the totality of all errors. Sorry, sometimes when I think about Hegel, I can't help laughing, but I'm sorry. You also said, as soon as we think we finally left Hegel behind and escaped his dialectic, we turn the next corner and see that he's standing there waiting for us, laughing. We'll never be done with Hegel. And since we can't escape Hegel, we might as well celebrate him. That's a very profound thought. But Hegel would say that if you accept Hegel as a negative of yourself, something which is imposed upon you from the outside, you are not truly free. And Hegel's system is a system of freedom. So consciousness has to recognize the impossibility of negating Hegel as a free act of the will, and to rejoice by reuniting with Hegel. That's quite speculative, but I think that Hegel would agree. And I would just conclude by saying that the best idea in a Hegelian sense, the very high intellectual grasping, the highest idea that a mortal creature can have, is to understand himself as being determined by what Hegel calls the absolute idea, which is the movement of all reality. And when this occurs, when you understand, I am an idea in the mind of Hegel, this is liberation. And I realized a couple of days ago that becoming God implies that to think Hegel is an idea in my mind, and God becomes fully God when he realizes that Hegel is just an idea in my mind. There are other ideas in my mind, but Hegel is just in my mind. And so man can unite with God by thinking himself as being a determinate moment in the process of the movement of the absolute idea, and God can I don't know how to express it because I'm not in this state of consciousness, but what I want to say is that in the absolute, Hegel and all the non-Hegelian, post-Hegelian philosophers and all the process of consciousness and reality and all that is just an idea in the mind of God. And that's one of the highest ideas ever possible to grasp. You said that Hegel is a moment in the process of consciousness coming to absolute knowledge of itself. And the only way to refute Hegel is through laughter. And in the Indian religions, Eastern religions, God is seen as always smiling and always in a state of peace and joy, because maybe the Buddha and the Eastern mystics and stuff like that, they have understood Hegel, and maybe that's why they are so peaceful, because finally they have arrived at maybe the nirvana as the Buddhists represent it is a full conceptual grasping of Hegel, and you attain the mind of God, and you know, oh, Hegel was just an idea in my mind. And if you do that, I think you might attain absolute liberation, absolute joy, freedom, peace of mind, and yeah. And then I'm sure that in the midst of this peace, you would say, it's so peaceful, nothing happens. Why don't we introduce a little bit of negativity within this within this state of pure happiness and joy, and the movement starts all over again. It's not impossible that it might happen like that. I don't know, but yeah. So I know that as I like to say, when you see this video, it will be too late for the empirical individual that I think of myself in my worst moments as being me. But in the bottom of my mind, I know that there's a very high probability that you, Matthew, will watch and understand this video, and that it will illuminate parts of your intellectual life, and that in a sense I was the missing link in your understanding of Hegel, because in order to understand yourself, you need the point of view of the negative, and the negative is some sort of the mirror of the world, which enabled the world to see itself through the mind of the negative, and the negative to see himself through the eyes of the world. And this dialectical process of being and negation is God's coming to absolute consciousness of itself. So my duty is that in the bottom of my being, in my best moments, I know myself to be a light, or to have a light within me, and my job is to enlighten others as much as I can, and by bringing them what I know and what I understand about Hegel and about being, I can kind of I don't know how to express it, but accepting the idea that I am not just the negative, but I have light to bring into the world, and I need to believe in this, because otherwise I would go insane. And yeah, so that was my contribution to bringing my part of light to you, and hopefully you will watch and understand this video someday. So that's what I wanted to do. So